to Destination Freedom. I'm Christopher Gronsky, and I'm glad you're here tonight. We're broadcasting in from the Live Free or Die state, New Hampshire, and hope we can have a nice evening and everything will go really well. So at least that we won't have any technical problems. So tonight on this particular call, we're going to talk about Allodial title, that kind of thing, and certainly property taxes and what's available, what's coming, things like that. So I'm going to talk about that. But before we do, I wanted to just talk a little bit about eliminating income tax liability. I just want to make a point that I think is really important. So before you set out and plan to secure your property, you might consider the priority of securing yourself first and really coming out of the federal zone for yourself. And we're talking about eliminating the income tax liability. So I want to just talk about, generally what people feel about IRS, the federal government, all that. And I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that most people don't feel represented by their central government. Okay. And I want to address that. Listen, if you don't know this, I'll just tell you about the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. It says that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States. That's the states, or any place subject to their jurisdiction. There is an exception in there, but that's not the point. There were two things in the 13th Amendment: slavery and involuntary servitude. Well, let me ask you how you feel about having your income taxed. Now, if you feel that your income is a right, then we know that it's illegal for any government to violate your rights. So here it is, there's a federal income tax, and it wasn't always this way. When they created the central government, then they created that income tax so that they could, fund the central government, because the income tax doesn't go to run your government. Just remember that. The Grace Commission says that not one nickel of the income tax goes to for services that the people expect, but all of it is taken up in transfer payments and interest payments on the debt. So the more debt, the more they collect on this income. So your labor isn't going to the central government; it's going to the central bankers. That's one thing you should know. Another thing is it against your will? If it's against your will, then it certainly would be qualified as involuntary servitude. Okay. So now you can see that in this administration, when this administration is trying to do whatever it's doing, that someone reaches out to the courts and interrupts some of this government activity because they feel that it's violating the rights of somebody. You see these judges step up. Where's one judge stepping up to interrupt involuntary servitude? It's not happening. Now, why is it? Is it because the judges are all on the take and the IRS is bad and the judges are bad? And of course, the central government's bad. Is it illegal? Are they violating the Constitution? Because as the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, every law has to it has to be constitutional. Otherwise, it is no law. There's no law. So what is it? And here's what I usually ask people, and that is, do you believe the federal income tax is constitutional? Generally speaking, other than my clients, people will say, no, that's not constitutional. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. And I just want you to know that's not true. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 gives the federal government exclusive legislative authority in all cases whatsoever. And it's in that the federal income tax, the power is given for the federal income tax. They can tax their citizens in that jurisdiction, and that meets constitutional muster. The Supreme Court has already ruled, you can look it up, that the income tax is an excise tax, which means there's a service they provide. And the beauty of an excise tax is that there's a choice. If you don't want to pay the gas tax, you don't have to buy gasoline. Now, you can say that it's bad, but that is your power. any excise tax you can choose not to pay if you don't take the service they're offering. So what's the service the federal government's offering with respect to income tax? That is being a 14th Amendment citizen subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Now, either what I'm saying is right, and you have a choice to change your citizenship from being a federal citizen to being a state citizen, and we can help you with that, or you're being held against your will and you are being controlled and you have involuntary servitude. So that's the choice. And if that's the case, then you have a right to defend yourself. You have a right to walk away and stop immediately giving them the first fruits of your labor. And of course, when you're in that jurisdiction, you don't have that say. You can't just walk away. You need to come out of that jurisdiction. And that's the kind of work that we do. So that's why it's a peaceful process. This is an administrative process. And here's the thing that's amazing is that if you're unwilling and are too afraid to do an administrative remedy in which we agree with the IRS in who they are taxing and regulating, the federal 14th Amendment citizen and the resident alien. So we recognize that we agree with the IRS. That's what we teach in our classes. And that's why none of our clients are having troubles with the IRS. We have clients that come in that are dealing with the IRS and we have to straighten out, but none of our clients are having trouble with the IRS doing what we're doing. And I wanted to invite you in and to enjoy the benefits of being outside federal jurisdiction. Okay. There are certain things the federal government does and has the power to do by the Constitution. And then there's things that can do what with exclusive, they have exclusive authority in the 10 square miles, District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, America, Samoa, all that. So that's the joy of it, is that you can come out of that and it's an administrative choice. This is no fight. It's no resistance. It's just paperwork. So hope you can enjoy it and be a part of it. Reach out to us at DestinationFreedom.org and get on board and we'll help you with that pathway. Okay. Thanks so much for that. So I wanted to get that off my chest. I was thinking about that all day, So, all right, we're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about property taxes, okay? And many of you feel the same way that, I buy this thing, and I think it was actually DeSantis, the governor down in Florida, who says, you buy a TV, you might pay a sales tax on it, but when you get home, it belongs to you. You don't keep paying on it. That's great. And so they're talking about owning your property and not having the property tax tied to it, which is powerful. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Okay. Now listen, people that own property wouldn't necessarily mind if they were paying taxes on helping their government run in some capacity. What you don't want your property tax going to is for welfare and charity. It's no place for the government to do charity. And there's a shitload of charity coming out of government. Like, should you be taking care of the old people at the nursing home in the county from your property taxes? Really? That's your responsibility? Maybe you're taking care of your parents, and it's not your responsibility to take care of someone else's parents. And of course, people can form charities to take care of people that are without funds and such as that. But it's no place for government to take from one person and give it to another. That's communism. It's communism. And and I talked to someone this last weekend about who thought he was an American, thought he was freedom-minded, thought he cared about liberty and freedom when he believes that you should tax the rich. That's communistic. From each according to his means to those, according to their need. That's communism. That's Marxism. That's not American. And it should be American to resist taxation. That should be American. So anyway, getting back to the property taxes. And there are a lot of liberals that want to pay for the government schools. Why? You know why this works for them? And property taxes pay for these schools? Because they suck. And any type of a monopoly that the government's supposed to be protecting us from, the government sets up an educational monopoly and screws everybody. And it would be one thing if the education system was educating children amazingly and we were at the top of our game. You could say, hey, it was worth it. But no, since the inception of the NEA, the National Educational Association, that or administration, the quality of education has been in the toilet, just like the dollar. And it's cost more money to educate kids today than ever in the history of the world. So that's a bad plan. Why? Because anything government touches turns to shit. So that's part of the problem. And people don't want that coming out of their property taxes. Back when there was property taxes, especially some of the first education, was corporations were taxed for the education of kids because they wanted a more intelligent workforce. Okay. And they paid those. And of course, people who bought their services were the ones that ultimately paid for the better, educated worker. Again, that was corporations. Then they kept moving it into the general public. It's bad. It's always bad. So people want to be free from the government schools in their property taxes. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And it's amazing. Maybe there's a trend now because Texas, the governor of Texas was talking about, giving some property tax relief. Because there's two entities, evil entities, that determine the value of your property. And when your government tells you your property is worth this, when you can't sell it for this, and they're taxing you at this price when you can't even sell it for that price, that's wrong. Who set that price? The tax collector who bases your property tax on the value of your property is the one setting the price. That's a problem ready to happen. I mean, give me a break. Who allowed that? Who came up with that idea and who allowed that? Thanks, grandparents or whoever. And you have to go back in history to see when property was being taxed that way. Now, property's been taxed a long time, but maybe just for the running of the government. So anyway, so property tax going for some of those things. Then how about this? Should you, let's say you're a senior and you're on a fixed income, and you notice that the people that are working for your town, county, or state are getting paid, and they have a benefit, a retirement benefit far better than yours. Should you be paying for their retirement benefit when you can't afford even your own retirement? You have to be in the county nursing home because you can't afford to take care of yourself because it costs too much to take care of your property. And how about this? How about your property taxes keep going up and up, and you're on a fixed income, and your income isn't growing, but your taxes keep growing. You're not holding on to your private property. You're paying rent to your town, your county, and your state. Then they throw you off your property when you can't afford it. That's stealing, folks. There's no eminent domain there. You just tax people right out of their property, take it for some next rich guy to take it. It's bad. And this is everywhere. It's just that bad. So what's the solution to it? We're going to talk about that. So you recognize, so there's things you're paying for that by itself should be pulled back from just a moral standpoint, but that's not what's that's not all of the remedy. Okay. So there has to be a choice for you in this in some capacity. And there is, and you have to look at that. There's things you're agreeing to you don't even know. Okay. Now, your property is a cash cow. What's that mean? Your town is thriving on it. Your county is being funded by some property taxes, among others. And then your state is. They're all collecting booty. In New Hampshire, we don't have an income tax. We don't have a sales tax. Well, we sort of don't have a sales tax. We have a room and meals tax, which ends up feeling like a sales tax. But anyway, room and meals. So there's, of course, there's other ways you're taxed, but we're just still talking about the property tax. Now, when you're looking at, so just want you to know there's 3 governments, maybe 4. You could add the federal government when you're talking about selling it. and you have to pay a capital gains tax on it if you don't buy another property right away. So you got four entities jockeying for a piece of the action from the value of your property, which of course is jacked up. Your property is not worth the amount the bankers and the tax collectors say your property is worth. Okay. They jack the price of your property up because they make interest on that number, and the the governments make our taxes on that rate or that percentage of what it's worth. So it's in their best interest to jack these up until the system collapses. So it's irresponsible. It's bad. So let's talk about some things. Well, there's things about property that you can look up in Black's Law or in anything with dealing with the feudal system, because we used to have private property. And if you notice, this is one of the first areas that you can address, and that is how and who is classifying your property. Okay, because property is typically classified as residential, commercial, agricultural, industrial, and there may be others, but I think about those big four. Most of the time, property is classified as. So who has the authority to classify your property, and what does it mean? Okay. When you look up residential, and look, you can just get a Black's 6th edition. Don't get a current Black's dictionary, because they leave out stuff, they add things. It's not clean. That's a standard. You can go back to 6th or earlier. 4th and 6th editions are very good. So you're looking at what your property is being classified as. All of those are privileges that government takes care of. Commercial, government manages the commercial spaces. It manages also residential. And so what does it mean when I say that the government is offering a privilege, or that it's caring for something like residential? A resident is the thing identified. Okay, and so residential, what they do is they're there to protect your property. And that's a benefit. And so they tax you based on that benefit. What's the benefit? Well, let's talk about policing. So your municipal police are paid through your town, county, or state policing to make you secure. We already know that the courts have established that the government doesn't have the obligation to protect you. That's why you have a Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms and to protect and defend yourself. That's your responsibility and your right. Okay, so the idea, so policing is one of the benefits that they give you when you're paying those property taxes. What's another benefit? Fire. Now, the fire department has no obligation to save your property from fire. There's no consequence if they don't get you put out and save your fire. Okay. What happens, and listen, you can check it out yourself. Go on YouTube and watch all of the fire videos where the fire department comes, all the house fires on, on YouTube. Watch them all. I mean, the idea is, if you think the fire department has a responsibility to put your house out, you're kidding yourself. They don't, because you could sue them if they are unsuccessful. But what happens is they're committed to make sure that your fire doesn't go to your neighbors. That's how they're protecting you. They're protecting your house from your neighbor's fire. And that's what they're committed to do, not let it spread. So not only are they not going to really care about putting your house out, they're going to add to the damage by flooding it. So you're going to have fire damage and water damage together that your insurance company can cover. How's that for a scam? So that's not good. And we're going to talk about a remedy that you can remedy for that. So policing, and then there's also, fire protection. That's protecting you. And you have to pay for that crap. And then those people have retirement plans and 401ks and all the stuff the government gives them, so that we can get government people to stay on and work for either penny wages while they have lots of benefits. It doesn't take care of you. Just want you to know. All right, then there's another aspect of protection you get. You have zoning. Now, why does zoning protect you? That's so that your neighbor doesn't set up a carnival in his property. It's my private property. I can do whatever I want on it. That's not true. Because you're going to do whatever your neighbors want. And if enough of them complain or get somebody elected, they will control you. Okay. And I'm not even talking about if you're in a homeowners association. I'm just talking about, your neighbors. I mean, because listen, if your house is a certain value and you didn't know that next door they're putting in a theme park and a giant Ferris wheel so that all these people can look into your yard, you have no privacy and you get to look at a Ferris wheel. Or maybe they put in a motorbike road race so it's loud. Now the quietness in your property. This is what zoning takes care of, so that you don't have something commercial next door to your residential property. So another protection government is offering you. And then there's the building codes. How's that protect you? Well, we don't trust you to take care of yourself. And so your property has to be acceptable for dwelling. So they have standards by way of how you're living. They won't let you live in a house that's not connected to the sewer system. They want that. And if your house doesn't have utilities, they may not allow you to inhabit a house that's off grid on some level and not attached to utilities. All these are ways that the town, county, or state is protecting you from yourself and making sure you're safe. See, it's always for a good reason. And I'm telling you this, you can look up these building codes and these standards. You can read it in the statutes and codes that govern those things and see that the ultimate loss of freedom is government offering you safety, and that people always will choose safety over freedom. That's always the conversation. It's never not the conversation. Government always encroaches on your rights in the name of, we're going to make sure that you're safe. Crock of crap. Okay. But if you want that safety, that might be what you pay for. So all that's what's happening. And it's because you don't classify your property as private. That's the first thing you might want to do. So what does that mean? So you got to look up who's the one that has the authority to classify your property, and how does that go about that way? Usually when you buy the property, you're buying a property that's called something residential, and there's an assumption, and you just pick it up and assume the same thing. You don't make a case. I remember when my wife bought her property, we gave them a paper before we paid them one nickel of taxes that said, we believe the property is misclassified. It should be classified as private, and we may visit this at some time. And that even though we are paying taxes on this, does not mean that we agree to the classification of the property. That was submitted in our real estate transaction. So before we submitted the taxation. So that's an important step. So that's one of the biggest problems, is you have allowed your property to be classified to what it is. And so that would be one of the things you might want to change. Now, so posting it may be something you do. You can look at that. Posting property there are standards in your state that deal with posting. And so therefore, you want to make sure you're following those standards if you don't want government people walking onto your property. In New Hampshire, all property is open unless you post it closed. So that's how it works. So people should be considerate if you go onto someone's property, that you give them privacy and you don't damage or harm anything on their property. So there's that. So anyway, so that's some of the problem. Okay. Now, if you're going to move move towards getting out of your property taxes, you have to understand that your neighbors, the people around you, may feel envious about what you're doing because you're not paying your fair share. And so then your neighbors who don't necessarily are against you are going to be against you because of envy, and that they're going to undermine it because you should be suffering like they're suffering, rather than them saying to you, wow, that's an amazing thing you're going to do. How can I be a part of that too? And when you're securing your property long-term, you have to let the abutters know, those are the properties around you, let them know what you're doing so that they have notice, because then they have remedies that they can implement if they don't agree with where you're going or what you're doing, if it affects their property. That's common courtesy, and that's a legal standard on some level. Okay, so allodial title, what is that? Allodial title is unalienable title, or title that um, what we means that there can't be a lien put against it. It's private in that capacity. Now, when we talk like that, what does it mean? You see, the property, the problem with the title deed that you have that's issued from the state is that there's an assumption, of course, and then and so the way the town, county, or state collects their property taxes, and look, the way generally property taxes work is that the state doesn't send you a property tax bill. The county doesn't send you a bill. Maybe some places they do, but generally they don't. Your town collects all the property taxes, and they pay the county on behalf of the town. They pay the state on behalf of the town if they're incorporated and that kind of stuff. So that's what happens usually. So you get one tax bill from your town. Now, if you notice and read your tax bill, and let me just talk a little bit about the tax bill. Okay, like most tax bills, they're so convoluted and screwy and crazy and whatever it is. It's not like a simple, here's a bill for services rendered. There's all kinds of stuff on there that you don't know and that you don't understand, generally speaking. And so, the scripture says, where there's confusion, there's every evil work. And guess what? There's evil work here, okay? It's not good. It's amazing. Let me tell you one of the scams that I know of. If the town wanted to collect another $100,000, $10,000, or whatever it is, and didn't want to raise taxes, do that. If they want to collect that money by way of the water, here's all they have to do is they just issue, we're going to flush the fire hydrants. And in many towns, they flush the fire hydrants and all of the water is polluted in the town water. And so when you pour your sink, it's coming out brown because they just cleaned their pipes with your water. And now it's coming into yours. And you're going to have to rinse your pipes out, let it flush through, let the toilet flush through, let all that water flush through. And that they're charging you for that cleaning. Okay. And so they're charging you for it. And because you have to clean it up, that's a way to raise thousands of dollars, depending on how large your municipality is. What a scam. What a brilliant idea. It's unfortunate. They should give you a rebate on that amount of water because they're cleaning out the pipes. Anyway, I digress. So getting back to the property taxes, we're talking about titles. Okay. A title deed is not a title. Okay. And when you set up title with the state, whoever issues title owns the entity. Okay. So the state actually owns your property and they classify you. You got to just look up the statute and codes that govern it. And you'll see terms like grantor, grantee. You're going to see those terms when you deal with your property in the county. Okay. And so when you look these things up and you understand what these relationships are. So now you're a tenant on the land. And yes, you can be thrown off your land. They can take it by eminent domain, or if you don't pay these taxes, they'll throw you off your property, just like a king would. And that's happening in America. And it should have never happened, but it did. No thanks to any of and all the attorneys that are around. It still, is a problem. So what's the answer to that? Now, there's two types of titles, if you will, that have been abandoned in your property case. Out west, maybe west of the Mississippi or whatever states the Bureau of Land Management handles, there was an original land patent associated with your property. So you can if you come up with, and you look on your real estate transaction or you go down to your county, you can find out the address, your address of your property, which is not really its proper address. The proper address of your property is by meets and bounds. And they have it marked out exactly what your property is. But the original land patent, your property was a part of an original land patent. And you're wanting to lay claim to that part that is yours or that you're possessing. And let me just say this as a standard. Generally on the earth, the land doesn't, you can't own the earth because there's no one that sells it to you. All you do with the earth is you possess it. You're holding it. That's what they did out west when they went in and staked their properties out. Look, uh, there were Indians that were, using that land, migrating and all that and such. And then all of a sudden, someone's staking out saying, you can't be here. They were possessing it. And governments back up that possessing the land. That's why land is never sold. It's always granted by consideration. And sometimes the consideration is cash. Okay. But it doesn't have to always be cash. But that's the way those real estate transactions are written. Look at it. It says so. So the Bureau of Land Management can give you a certified copy of the original land patent out west. You'll get it with a seal on it from the Bureau of Land Management. So that's how you identify your property. Now, if you notice, you should be able to read who was the original owners or the possessors of that land from the land patent, which came from, the Homestead Act, and the government was, registering all this property that they were giving away. So out west, that's how you do it. In the east, land was granted to a community from the king in a charter. And those charters recognized that if the people of that town held the land for 7 years and had a parsonage and whatever, and held the land from Indian attack and things like that, then the king gave them that land. Okay. Just the same way the government. So that's what's occurred. So when you read those original documents, the charters or the Bureau of Land Management, you can see who was the original possessor of the land or owner of the land. Well, what happens is they would pass that on to their heirs or a new assign, someone who was assigned to it if they sold the property. Now it's not their heirs. Now it's the new assign. And that would have a chain of title. Your title companies today don't do chain of title, even though they're making like they are. They're doing chain of real estate transaction. They're not doing anything with the title. All they're looking is that there's no liens on the property and that the transactions that went down legally. That's all they're doing. It's really not a title company. Not by the use of the word title. So anyway, so that's what's happening. And so whenever they moved out of private property and the state got involved, when the state started issuing title, then the state was the owner and they're issuing they're calling someone an owner, but that just means they're the owner of the tax bill. Okay. That's what they're the owner of. So that's what's occurring in that is there's no real title. It's a title deed. So when you bring, and let me just say this, the title deed can have liens against it and things like that to collect bills and things that are owed. The proper way in a state for that to happen would be through going to court and proving that you have an obligation, and then they'll put a lien on it. That's the way in most all states where proper liens and levies should be, at least liens. And so that's one thing that has to be addressed is who owns it. Now, when we talk about allodial title, we're just saying that it's unalienable. Okay, and here's what that means. You see, the town, county, and state don't have to take you to court to take possession of your property if you haven't paid the bill. There's just a presumption, and they have statutes and codes that tell them what the procedure is to take possession of your property, giving lots of notice, doing these things, putting a lien on it, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff happens when you don't pay that bill. And so that's just a procedure that they have because the state is in control of that. If you had an allodial title, meaning that you had the original title and you updated it and put that in the record and that was yours, they can't take the property from you. That's what's broken. They could sue you for what they think you owe based upon your use or whatever the case may be. That's a remedy for them. But by them not being able just to take the property from you without going to court is the difference. with respect to whether it's your property or the state's property. So that's part of the things that'll change with allodial title or bringing forth those land patent or charters. So that's some of the basis of those differences between the title deed the state issues and your allodial title. Now, there's a procedure in that, and I've done that with some clients years ago, but they backed out because they got an attorney involved, and the attorney didn't like the idea that I wasn't an attorney and I was advising them, and so it became a pissing contest. The attorney was telling them that they needed to make a report and report me to the state for practicing without a license and all that. I wasn't practicing anything. I was actually doing it, unlike they are. So anyway, we never got to complete those tasks. I think at least 2 times when I've helped a property owner, when they all of a sudden reached out to an attorney, and usually they reach out to an attorney when the bank is squeezing them. And so people will do anything or throw anybody under the bus in order to, hold on to their house, understandably. Anyway, we had an amicable separation. So anyway, there was no wrongdoing on my part. So there's that, dealing with title. But the other thing is, remember when I said that your property is a cash cow? You have 3 different government relationships that are used to receiving cash from you that you have to renegotiate those agreements, because you may still feel like there's things you want to pay for, and that's going to be apportioned among the other property owners in the town, county, and state. And so it's very little money that you have to pay or that you're wanting to pay outside of the government charities and the bloated government for all the reasons that you don't want to have to pay for things. When they talk about paying for things, everybody pays for the town halls, lights, and then the running of the town. But you may feel the town is too lucrative and you can't afford it. One remedy is to move, but another remedy is to resist that. So if the town feels you owe them money, they can always sue you for that, and that's a proper remedy. And then you can pay things that you've used in the town or that's been part of your betterment. Okay. That's one conversation about that. But believe it or not, you can negotiate all of the care they're giving you. Let me give you an example. If you don't want to pay the taxes that are collected to go to the fire department, then you can reach out to the fire chief, have him come over, pay him for his time, and say, can you look over my property for a safety check? Let the fire chief take a look at all that, give you some advice and all that. And then you can even invite him inside, check my house out. Here, I have fire extinguishers, I have smoke detectors, I have all this safety and stuff in case there's a fire. And so then they'll tell you, and then you ask him, how much would it cost the town to put my house out if it was fully engaged in fire? They might call that a 3 or a 4 alarm fire. What that means is there's 3 or 4 other towns that have alarmed to come and help put out your fire. And so there's they always have a number value of what it costs the town to put out this fire or that fire. Well, what you do is you go to your insurance company. When you get that information from your fire chief, you submit that to your insurance company and say, listen, if my house is on fire and I file an insurance claim, we expect the insurance company to pay the fire department for coming to put out the fire, allegedly. That's a good negotiation. Now you're not paying taxes on something you're not using. You're going to pay for services when they're rendered, and that's cool. And listen, I know when I was a selectman in my town, you can give the town a waiver to not protect you, to not have to keep your property safe. And many times they're on your property putting out so it doesn't spread to your neighbors, because that's a liability. If you had a fire in your house and your neighbor's house caught on fire, then they could sue you for the unsafe environment or whatever had happened if your fire came onto theirs. So that's always a remedy. So anyway, so that's you can renegotiate, and you can negotiate every aspect of your property tax bill. So those are the relationships, and you can do that for the county, for the town, and the state, is go in and renegotiate and work that out. But the actual end of what I don't recommend necessarily is that you set up a resistance and just stop paying the taxes, because they're going to have the leverage to take your property. And that's typically what happened. And there's not much you're going to do about that unless you come up with a way or a remedy for that. So now we have a group of people in New Hampshire that are working on remedies, all the things that I've talked about, making these changes and moving ahead so we can move towards not having the liability for property taxes. And certainly 2/3 of our tax bill in our town is school. So if we could shut that down, that'd be 2/3 savings. And remember, that goes to the school. That doesn't go to run your town. Our town, in our small town, we have only 1,100 people. It costs a little more than $1 million to run our town, but it costs more than $2 million to educate 100 kids. It's bad. So that's part of the problem. So anyway, so the process now, what a lot of people in this freedom movement and all that, they think they want to do is come up with a paperwork or an administrative remedy that the paperwork will do the job. Okay, I don't have those expectations that magical paperwork is going to accomplish, because there is paperwork associated with these processes, but you're also dealing with the human part of it, and that is people, your neighbors and your town, those governments that are made up of people that enforce laws, statutes, and codes, and you don't want to alienate them. So if you're going to take some time to eliminate your property taxes, and we are aware of all these different remedies, and they're at different stages for different people. We have not gotten to the place to where we're clearing somebody free from their property taxes. That's still yet to come. And for me, in the work we do, we specialize in eliminating federal income tax liability. This isn't an area that I have a remedy for. These elements we do, and we have helped people with all the elements that I've talked about so far. But to the end that we're not paying the property taxes is not there yet. And I won't promote something unless I know that I can have this happen everywhere, that by principle it would work the same way everywhere. When we get to that end, I will be promoting that. But there may be a few adventurous clients and all, and I do have clients that are in this area that are moving forward in this, and of course we help them and support them in that. So the idea is that if you're going to do this and you're going to learn how to do that, you should set up a closet, a room, or some section of your home that I would call, for lack of a better term, is the war room. Okay. Not that it has to be that. And I don't like that energy. But it'd be the same thing if you were going to start any kind of a project. Like, let's say, when you look at all the people involved with making a movie, and the producers come in and they got the plan, they have the director and all the experts that come in, all these people, and they basically like build a city, they build a thing, they have this filming happen, they close up, finish up, they wrap it all up, and that's a certain timeline that they make a movie, and there can be millions and millions of dollars involved. Well, you would be doing the same thing. You're going to be learning about your property. You're going to be looking up paperwork, looking up statutes and codes and all. That's the work. And so this may take 3 to 5 years. It's not going to be a quick remedy because you didn't get here quickly. It's taken time for this kind of an encroachment on your pocketbook, So you set up a table and you get all your files and you get yourself neat. You figure out who you're going to meet. You have a public relations part of this process. You're not looking to do this being a dick. You don't want to do that. Because what do they say that, I don't know what the phrase is, like the bees are more attracted to honey than to vinegar, So the idea is that you want this to be a beautiful act of love. Imagine if you were to put out to your town and said, hey, we're working on remedies to eliminate property taxes. Most wouldn't believe it's possible, but you might get 1, 2, 3, 10 people in your town that are interested in the subject matter that would meet every week to talk about these things, to study these things, to look into these things, and to make this plan. Especially your neighbors that abut your property. They have to be given notice on when you're making changes and you're taking ground. They have to know it's a consideration. So it's important. So you're going to methodically work this stuff out and and have a plan and work it till completion. And again, once we have remedies, we'll be offering those things. But generally speaking, that's the kind of plan. You can look up these things. I have a client in Texas where they've had somebody that's had like 16 cases that they have successfully come off of the doles. That's another thing that people do, is that they register their property and get on the tax doles. And so they've had ways of um, removing themselves from those public doles where they're taxed. And so they end up in a different category. And it sits there until the town's able to remedy the changes that are made. And allegedly, I haven't proven this yet, but the entity that was helping them has had 16 of these go into court and has won all 16, which is a pretty good record. So there are remedies that I'm studying, that we're looking at this. And so anyway, we can work on this together and move down this pathway. Okay, that's cool. So anyway, so that's just some of the general stuff of that. Let me look and see what we got here. Have some. This is John. He says, "Hi, Chris. I guess the freedom movement isn't dead." No, the freedom movement is alive and well. It has all sorts of different elements. And of course, you can participate and get good at whatever element you find interesting in. And that'll be cool. So, we just want to move these things. Listen, and the energy associated with it is this. There's two things that you come to the table. Listen, don't come fighting, because government will fight you back and you're not going to win that fight. Okay. Come at this, assuming all responsibilities. Don't receive a benefit. Say, listen, I don't want that benefit. Thank you, but no thanks. I don't want that benefit. I want to be responsible for myself. And then you say, listen, I want to just secure what I have right to. I want to secure my rights, and I want to assume all my duties and responsibilities. That's all. And I want to avoid as many taxes that I can legally avoid, and that's tax avoidance, not tax evasion. All that is the best energy coming to the table, with joy and with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, right? So Stephen, he says, let's see, I've done a deed search on my property as far as back as I could, but couldn't find the original grant and was told that I have to go to England to get it. Does that sound right? Not likely, but there may. So are you saying that your state is one of the original colonies? Are you talking about that you're in the east here? Where is your property located? What state? Let's see if he will say. Let's see. So anyway, so if he answers that, we'll find out. But if it's out west, you're going to be dealing with the Bureau of Land Management. In the east, you're going to be dealing with your county. Your county record should have go back as far as possible. Now, it's possible that in the South, certain records have been destroyed because of the Northern aggression during the Civil War. That's a possibility. And if that's true, you may be able to find the original charters in England. That may be true. And you might be able to get someone to help you with that. So there was another question. Do we have another one? Okay. Oh, you're in New Hampshire. All right, Stephen. Yeah, that's cool. That's going to be, you should be able to find that in New Hampshire. Again, the county is going to have that. So whatever county you're in, go to the county seat and look up those records. If they're not there, they're going to be in the state archives, which is on Fruit Street in Concord. But you're probably going to find it in the county. And so if you know what county you are, where the county seat is, you'll be able to go in there. Have you looked at your property's paperwork as far back as it goes in the county? So it says you did a deed search on your property. A deed search. I'm sorry, I was saying dead. It meant deed. He said deed. Yeah, again, that's what I recommend. It'd be kind of cool. But anyway, that's what I recommend, is go to the county. That they should have those records. The let's see, is there more questions, or did we get it? All right, we got New Hampshire. So anyway, so that's that's generally speaking the property tax, and that's the task at hand and how to move that forward. And again, we're glad to help in any part of those processes. A lot of times people will figure that out. Will might have us assist in some way. And for our clients, we have a weekly client call. We can discuss these things. Stephen says yes. However, I did not get my copies stamped by the registrar. Yeah, I mean, you can just go in and take a look at those things. They don't have to be certified. You can make photocopies of whatever's in your file on that property. And if you're in New Hampshire, I'm pretty confident that you're going to be able to see um, the original charter. And if you may find that original charter in some of the town records, because the town would have had original families that were part of the original town's charter. So you might have to look outside of your property and look at the town's property. So, the original families that were there, and you don't have to have things certified by the county, but if you're doing Allodial title, you need to find out who the original charter was, what that family name was, find out if it was passed on to their heirs, and then find out where you're looking for the place to where it's dropped so that you could become the new assign. That's what your position is the new assign. And then you can file and then what you're going to be doing is you're going to be assuming that original title. And that's the original title. That's not a title deed. And that's what's Allodial is that. So you want to get that paperwork together. And yes, you would get that certified by the county, those records, so that they're proven as fact and enter into that. Then there's other paperwork. There's paperwork to be submitted to the county saying that you're claiming the original charter and being the new assign. You'd be giving notice because some of your neighbors may be on that original charter land and you're not taking possession of their land. You could, but I don't think that that's moral. Okay. You're just taking possession of your property. Now, if you, it's just another weird remedy that I've heard and people have done. And that is if the bank owns your property, they don't have the title. Okay. And you can ask the bank to see what they have. More than 70% of real estate transactions have some deficiency where the bank doesn't actually own it because they don't actually have title. They have photocopies, not original documents. But anyway, real estate is all the improvements on the land. So if you took possession of the land itself, not the real estate, but the land, then you could begin to submit bills to the bank for the property that you now own and start to have them lease the property from you conveniently at the price of the mortgage, maybe a little more so you can get all your interest back or something. But that would be an interesting way to play that out. And of course, I've heard that people have done this. I've not done this myself, but it's a great idea to move forward if you care to do that. So, well, let me see if I have any other questions. All right. Well, listen, we're going to wrap this up. Just wanted to throw out some ideas about Allodial title, things like that. There's some administrative remedies. There's some people remedies and things. And so that's a great, thing you could pursue. And of course, you want to secure yourself first. Make sure you're not a statutory citizen of the federal government. You want to be a citizen of your state, that has no federal income tax liability. Secure yourself first. We're glad to help you with that. And then you can secure your property, okay? So I appreciate you being here. Be sure to like and subscribe if you care for our content. And I'm just delighted to be a part of your life and help you secure your liberty and freedom. I'm Christopher Gronsky. This is Destination Freedom, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
do not wish this life to pass away, but life presents such possibilities each and every day. I heard a calling that was right for me. I prayed for strength for what's ahead of me. Show me the way. Please show me the way. The sun rose high and burnt the night away. Who stood before me was my enemy. Don't tread on me. He's come to take away my liberties. I'd rather die than be a slave to thee. Don't treat